Catus, Maximus here. This time it's just a quick review and a public service announcement, I guess, about expensive or top-end American locks. I've done a few lock videos here and there just because they're mechanical and they're big, heavy metal things, kind of like the tools that I like to do so many videos on. Should also mention I really appreciate 20,000 subscribers just hit that, and I wanted to say thank you so much. I really appreciate the support. I have just kind of a basic channel here that I do have future plans for, and I'm actually really surprised I've even been able to build up this many subscribers, given the nature of my content. But I really do appreciate it and really like making these videos, and it always gives me a daily goal. That's why I make these videos every day, is because it's just something, something to put out there. Maybe, just a few people will watch it, but that's kind of the point, is just to get more information out there and to share stories and experiences and opinions. And I think I'm going to do a live stream, and I'll be responding to a bunch of comments with that. Anyway, the warning with these American locks is a lot of maybe my subscribers have heard of American locks. Their top end, I think it would be the top 3 or 4 models, which this is the 748. This is the big guarded hasp or shielded hasp, closed shackle, shrouded, various terms. There's just their big 11 millimeter 7/16, just big padlock. The warning is that padlocks like this, and actually they're, I believe this is their number 3 or number 4. They have the 748, they have the 780, the 790, and they have the 2500. And those are like the 4 toughest locks American lock ever made. I'm not a big lock collector, but I had a few other American locks, so I thought, if I pick up this and I already had this, then I can kind of have like the selection of almost all the best locks that they made, and that's kind of just like collecting tools. Locks are a form of a tool. Locks like this particular one, the big one, and this round one, they all are supposed to come with the cores, come with all stainless steel pins. All the lower pins on all the upper pins are all stainless steel for increased drill resistance. And I've seen it on YouTube videos. There's even a big, lock YouTuber where it happened, where they got one of these locks and it did not have the stainless steel pins. It's really easy because you can just see the brass pin that's in there, not a gray steel looking one. That happened to me on this. I got it off of eBay, so it's something I'll have to deal with. It's basically impossible to try to order one of those stainless steel pin cores. I did call a few locksmiths. One of them said they'd have to get back to me. So I don't have a lot of confidence about that. So it's a real shame that there are these issues, and I've searched on Google, and there are reports on forums where that's what people are doing. They're buying these top-end American locks, swapping out the steel pin cores, and then sending them back with their old cores that come in their smaller, more basic locks. And it's a real shame, and it's really screwing things up because it's happened to big YouTubers, and it just happened to me. So it's just, Americans got to figure out a way to get that under control. Because without steel pins, this lock, part of the reason you would spend, and it's a hugely expensive lock. I got it off of eBay for a really good price. And probably now one of the reasons I know is because it didn't have the proper core in it. But these locks can range around $80 or so online. They're pretty expensive. A locksmith is going to charge $100 or more. As far as what they are pretty heavy duty, and they are different. Just besides the size, it's just a huge block of steel. The American locks are never as elegant as their ABIS counterparts, but we'll get into that in just a second here. But the big deal about this lock and all the drill resistance is it doesn't have that single, that's not a rivet, it's a screw, not a special plug. But this is not as secure. This is still susceptible to dent pullers and more susceptible to grinding. And so the big upgrade on this lock is just a much heavier duty and more robust securing mechanism for the core that resists core extractors and all that type of stuff. So that's just a big block of steel in there versus just a simple cover plate. And just to compare, this is the 3/8 version. So here's the 7/16 shrouded. This is the 3/8 shrouded. And this is the 5/16 shackle shrouded. So they're relatively proportional. Actually, these two are the same height, and then this, the big one gets much taller, but there's just a comparison of the 3 different sizes. The other big deal about this lock is that the cams in these that push the ball bearings out are almost exclusively brass, and sometimes they're zinc. They're even even worse. But that actually makes these other locks more susceptible to severe hammering and prying attacks. There's always picking issues. There's so many picking videos of American locks, you really wonder if they really are pick resistant at all. But most, that's a diminishing type of threat, because many times you use a lock like this where you're more worried about just physical threats. And somebody can always use an angle grinder, but if you're moving, putting this on a moving truck or something like that, is certainly better than just like a $10 special at the store. Storage units. Anyway, when they get beaten, the ball bearings can be driven into the brass because it's softer, and then the shackle can slip past. So the inside of these uses a steel actuator, and that's also the same with the big ABUS 8355 series, as they also use steel actuators. It is a pretty hefty lock. Both of these are 7/16 shackle locks, so the equivalent size class. But we can see the ABUS is definitely just a bit more compact. It doesn't have as much protection for the core as this one does, but it's still, it's okay. The biggest Achilles heel is this is just held in by a small screw, where this has a much more robust retention mechanism. But the ABUS body is just a bit more compact, can get into tighter spaces, and that's the biggest issue with these Americans, is they're just so bulky. And then American does this weird thing where they anchor the shackle really low, so when you open up these locks, you just don't get a lot of clearance here. I mean, it's really a pretty tight fit to try to get this around a lot of shackles and be able to swing it closed, and a lot of people have had those kind of issues. If we take something like this ABUS here, it's a pretty stark difference. Now we can see if both the German lock opens to the right, the American lock opens to the left. It's kind of interesting, but we can see where the ABUS, they are thinner on the sides of the walls, but there's still plenty of protection on this. But what they do is, one, they allow the shackle to rise up much further above the body. So you can actually, and a little bit lower profile means you can get this lock onto a whole lot more hasps versus this American one. If we look at this, it's just crazy the amount of difference in space. And it's always been the big criticism is the fact that these Americans are just so bulky, and the shackle just barely gives you any space to actually lock it up to anything. And just for the people out there, we'll knock this apart. The other big difference is that the normal locks, these normal Americans, use very small screws, but this lock here, we can see uses an actual decent sized socket head cap screw. If we can get this to focus, there we go. So much more robust a screw. And then it actually just has a whole steel plug that sits in the bottom. Then you have this little window that rides into an undercut in the body of the lock, so it is just far more secure. The window on these is entirely held in by the rivet. This window is slid in and then blocked by the plug, so you have a lot of work, or just a lot of steel and material that's in there. The other thing that isn't mentioned, special orders, you can order these style. These big 748s as being key retaining, so these little washer bypass plates aren't an issue. And here we are. There's a lot of I've noticed, I watched a few videos, they don't mention that, but you can see that actuator is not cast zinc. That is magnetic. That is a steel actuator down there, so offers just much more hammering resistance. And there actually are some firefighter videos of them hammering open, the other big American lock. And so this just offers a much more shackle support. I was going to mention part of the elegance of the ABUS shackle coming up so far is that they can have the extra shackle support, where you can see on the American that they've had to really cut it out right here just so the shackle could clear the body. So they definitely have some design improvements. Overall, really, when it comes down to, if you're going to use a lock like this, hopefully you can use like this Lee jaw I reviewed earlier. Still just, absolutely shames this American. This Lee jaw is just a massive, massive lock. And people want to talk about pick resistance. It's probably, you know better than I would, whether an American lock with its special little pins are more pick resistant than a really deep set disc detainer. It's probably a disc detainer just because it has This requires different skills and very specialized tools, and a lot less likely that the person trying to break into your stuff is a person who has the special tools and skills. And this lock with the 14 millimeter shackle, just 9/16, just super duty, super thick. So that's really what I tell you. And this thing, you could, for the retail price, you can buy 2 of these Lee Jaws for the price of one high shackle American. Anyway, that was my review. This is kind of like a famous lock that, you know, I had looked at it for a long time when I had these other smaller ones. It was like, oh, it's way too much money. And so I kind of backburnered it. But finally saw one come up for sale, and unfortunately somebody had just swapped out the core with just like a regular old core, and I got a little bit gypped, but I saved so much money, so it's fine. And it's, you know, to tell you the truth, it would be a pretty specialized situation where I'd use something like that, because quite frankly the Avis fits a lot better. I do have this one. One thing I do find puzzling about this lock, and on a last note, and probably my last lock video for a real long time, is I don't understand this, because they have like a anti-drill plate, but you know, these anti-drill plates are pointless, because you would just drill out the shear line. You just use a drill bit that would fit into this space here, and I mean, drill bit's 1/4 inch drill bit, more than do that. I didn't understand why they didn't use something like this, which is a much tighter, narrower slot, and is actually like a spinner thing that's in there. It even looks like this one could just drop into this lock, so I don't know why they didn't use an actual anti-drill spinner. Anyway, that's my review of the American 748. It's really a pretty expensive lock, but really once I only paid like $65 or something for this, and just to kind of go along with these other American locks. And there just hasn't been a lot of notable lock manufacturers in the United States. It's kind of surprising. There's certainly been a few, but it seems that so many of the really high security stuff just doesn't come from the United States. It's really kind of a funny situation. I mean, there are a few brands, but you know, it's like when you consider tools, and they're just, you know, half the tool brands in the world or something, or more than that, both hand and power are, you know, based in the United States. It seems that locks would be along with that, but they really just aren't. This American lock is not worth the money. That's all there is to it. It doesn't have $100 of pick resistance, and even though it's really physically robust, it's just so overly thick on the sides. The shackle open is such a narrow opening, and doesn't come out very far out of the body, that it makes it very difficult to get it actually locked onto a variety of hasps and things that you would actually use a lock this physically secure for, versus this one, which is maybe not quite as physically secure, but at least you could be able to use it, and versus this, which is just, you know, won't lock up on your semi-truck. It just won't clear the loops and things like that. It's kind of lame. And as far as real physical security, I still think this hidden shackle lock is still by far the most secure lock physically secure lock American lock has ever had their name on. This thing is super duper physically secure. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.